Welcome to Rock and Recovery. Your host is me. I've got a special guest today. His name is Evan. I can't pronounce his last name, so I'll just call him Evan. But before we get going, it is Suicide Prevention Month. It's also Recovery Awareness Month. So if you know somebody that's going through it, give them a call. Let them know that they're there, that they're appreciated. And if you're going through it, 988 in the US and Canada, 111 in the UK, reach out and talk to somebody. That's what they're there for. They're there for you to talk to connect with, just to help you get through that bad time. So let's everybody say hello to Evan.
Hey, it's great to be here, Jay. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I have no idea how to pronounce your last name, so I wasn't even going to try to butcher it. I'll be honest. It's like, I could probably say it, but I'm not going to try.
In my entire life, two people have got it right the first time.
Okay, let me try
Nobody. Okay.
I'm not even going to try it. Is
Jaqua? No, actually, Jaqua.
Jaqua? I was thinking Jaqua, so I was close.
Yeah, well, it probably should be pronounced Jaqua because my ancestors were French, but I don't want to give the impression I speak French, so I say it as I've been taught. Jaqua.
Well, I know a little bit of French. I like je ne sais pas, which means I don't know.
Yeah, that's about the extent of my. I was actually in France last month, and yeah, that's about the extent of my French as well. Merci, je ne sais pas, and je ne parle pas français.
Exactly. I'd always say, we had two options in high school, either Spanish or French. I'm like, I don't want to learn Spanish. I'll learn French. So anytime, that's the first phrase I learned. So anytime the teacher called on me is je ne sais pas.
Exactly. Exactly. That was like my standard answer as well when the teacher would would ask me a question. And that's what I did too. I took French in high school because I didn't really want to take Spanish. I was working with a lot of people from, well, let's just say, undocumented immigrants in the dish room. I was working at a dish room in a university. And, these were pretty rough people. I wasn't really very interested at the time in learning their language, so I chose French. But it's a beautiful language. When I was there in France, in Paris, I sure wish I knew more because there were so many beautiful women there. But maybe
tell me a little bit about yourself and what you want to talk about today, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, my name is, like I said, or like you mentioned, my name Evan Jaqua, and I've been living around the world for most of my life. Spent many years in Japan, in China. I'm actually talking to you from South America right now.
Nice.
And based on many experiences I've had with people from different cultures and different parts of the world, different languages, I've actually learned actually 4 languages during all this time. I've come up with some ideas for some reform in our country, and one of the things that I talk about is addictions. Our nation, it just seems to be addictions are such a huge part of our economy, basically. And now I just want to give a little background on some of a couple of things that I've struggled with. One was video games. When I was, I actually got my master's degree in Japan. And for Christmas one year, a friend of mine gave me some floppy disks. This was back in the days of floppy disks.
The 5 1/4?
Yeah. No, actually, I think they were 3.5.
3.5? Okay.
And it was a Might and Magic. And so I was working on my thesis, my master's thesis, a lot of things to do. But every hour or so, I thought, I'll just take a little break, 5 minutes on the game, and then get back to work. And before I knew it, it was like 50 minutes on the thesis and 10 minutes on the game, and then it was 40 minutes on the thesis and 20 minutes on the game. And before I knew it, it was 55 minutes on the game and 5 minutes on the thesis.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was uncontrollable. I just couldn't stop. And but the good thing is that they were floppy disks. So I gave the floppy disk to my girlfriend. I told her, take those floppy disks, put them in your office, and never give them back to me. And ever since then, I've never touched a video game because I know that, once I get into that, sort of, what's the word? You just get kind of
that mindset.
With it.
Yeah, you do. That hyperfixation.
Yeah. And you just, And then I, in my family, we've had terrible addiction problem, primarily alcoholism. My dad was a terrible alcoholic, uncle, two aunts, cousins. And I like to say my dad was a very good example of a bad example. So I always have tried to be very careful to not go down that route, of so I just limit myself to 2 beers. But I've taught my daughters that too. But my younger daughter seems to have ignored my warnings and really seems to have alcohol consumption issues, despite what I told her from the earliest age. That we got to be careful with alcohol in our country, in our family. And then I would say I have kind of an exercise addiction. I have to exercise at least an hour and a half a day, and I would do a lot more, but I try to control it. And so I definitely, in our family, we have a lot of addiction issues, and I have tried to learn from my family to, keep those under control. But I think that what is really important when we talk about our just our country in general is just how much our economy is dependent on addictions. Whether you're talking about social media, alcohol, especially gambling with the sports gambling,
Shopping.
the shopping, video games like I had. The human brain is a wonderful thing, but it's one of its greatest weaknesses is the ease with which it can become addicted to things. And whether we're talking about physical addictions, like alcohol, drugs, junk food, or whether we're talking about behavioral addictions like the pornography, gambling, video games, social media, or whether we're talking even emotional addictions like to certain, like even emotions like hate, greed, and anger can be very addictive. This is what a lot of our quote unquote media companies take advantage of. They're more in the emotional manipulation business than they are in the
See, I would
news
have never
business.
have thought anger as being addicting, but I can see that now. It is actually.
It actually is. In fact, one of the I'm not going to pick on any one network here, but there was a book written by a former Fox News host, and what they would do every morning is that they would find topics that would
Controversial
stimulate
topics stimulate a response.
exactly, because that anger gives like a dopamine type of stimulation, and that these and so because traditional news, the business model is broken down because any Joe with a laptop and a web page got a news site. They've shifted to emotion manipulation because people get addicted to their daily, and they want to get their daily infusion of rage or whatever, or they want to feel that rush of hate. And it's become big business in our country. It's very destructive. And but when you think about it, the best business to be in is one where you have addicted customers because you're guaranteed a recurring revenue. And so that's why I think addictions are such a big part of our economy. And it's one of the big horrible issues with the quote unquote drug war. Because that's an incredibly lucrative business, because once they get you hooked, you're gonna do what you have to get those
Right.
drugs. And when I'm not in South America, I'm in Portland, and the streets are just inundated with people who have obviously got addicted to something, and they're basically, their lives is controlled by it.
So when did the drug war actually start? Was it the Reagan era that
No, actually, it was the Nixon. Nixon
was
started the
it?
drug war. Now, Nixon was not a dumb guy. He was a very smart
Right.
guy. He had to have known that a war against drugs would be about as effective as prohibition was. In other words,
Yeah, it's a losing battle.
yeah, because it is, it's a business, and
It is.
all you do is you don't get eliminate. You just make it the business of the gangsters and the criminals and the cartels. And there's so much money involved, and then when you get money involved, you get corruption. Like it's here in South America. The politicians and the police and the armed forces, the judges, they're all on the payroll of these drug cartels because there's so much money. and the Pablo Escobar, the former drug kingpin, he had a policy called plata o plomo, which means bucks or bullets. If you
Right.
cooperate, you get bucks. If you don't, you're going to get a bullet.
Right.
And and so what the drug war has actually done, it's made things worse because it's made a perverse incentive for people to push drugs at a very early age. Most people get addicted to drugs before they're 18. And these pushers, they want to get
The
customers who are
kids,
addicted.
they want they
Yes,
want them to start young because then you got a long life of returning
ex-
customers.
exactly, exactly. And they choose the most vulnerable kids, the kids who
Broken
are the
homes,
easy.
ghetto,
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
poverty line, below the poverty
Yes,
line. Oh, you could do this to help your mom.
yes, exactly. Or, for example, the drug pusher might, befriend or be fake being romantically interested in a lonely girl, girl who doesn't have any dates, and then it gets to the thing. Well, if you really love me, you'd take this too. And then once they get hooked,
Yeah.
that's that. And so to address this, what I have proposed is that we basically the way to win the drug war is to destroy the economics. If you can't make money selling drugs, then you're not going to have the business, and you're not going to have the pushers.
So are
And
you
so
saying legalize it or
I'm saying not only
decriminalize it?
legalize it. I'm saying not only legalize it. Let's make this sounds incredibly radical. This sounds, but let's make it so that if you are addicted to drugs, you can get your drugs. You get them for free, basically.
Hmm.
But there are a couple of things. You get them for free, but you have to reside in a certain place. You can't reside in the street. We'll give you modest, humble housing. You can take your drugs, but you'll always have access to medical care, to treatment, and
But what do you say to
to
the addict that it's ruining their lives? What would you say to that person? Because
well,
I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I'm an addict
right.
myself, been in prison for almost 20 years. And even if it was legal, I wouldn't want it to come from the government.
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. But the thing is that the people who are addicted are going to get their drugs anyway. And so,
Correct.
what is it better? Is it better for them to be giving money to drug pushers who then send it to the cartels, or is it better to just some people there's no hope, and they'll never recover because their addiction becomes their life. But and so, what's the best thing you can do? Well, you just give them a comfortable place. You give them their drugs, and you just let them, veg out on their drugs. That's all they live for. But it's
So,
better than them. Okay, that's point number one. Point number
okay.
two is that there are people though who can be treated, and so you get them into these facilities where they have their access to drugs, but you give them access to treatment. And then the third and most important thing is that what I've proposed on my blog is we start an addiction awareness day, which means that uh, starting from a young age, we have one day of the year where the school day is dedicated to teaching kids about addictions. And that means you teach them all the different types of addictions. You have people come in who have addictions, who are struggling
Isn't
with
that like
addictions.
promoting it? Because I'll tell you what, we had dairy in class in school.
Mhm.
The whole egg in this frying pan, and all I would say is, "Where's the bacon?"
Uh-huh.
Because basically that was promoting something for those kids, for people like me in the mindset that I was in. You can't tell me what to do. I don't care if it's good for me or bad for me. I'm going to do it whether I want to or not.
That's
And
exactly right. You're exactly right. But the thing is what you do is you've got to give people information and then let them decide for themselves. And so we start off at an early age. Okay, these are the types of things you can get addicted to. This is what's going to happen to you if you get addicted. And you have people come in and talk about their struggles with addiction. You have people come in and talk about how they got past their addictions. You have medical experts come in and talk about the physiology of addictions, and you get them aware of what they're dealing with and recognizing the signs of an addiction, whether we're talking to junk food, like
okay,
I don't
so I think
right.
okay, so I think I'm gonna I disagree with you. I like your idea and I like where it's headed, but I disagree with you because if you tell them all of the things that are going to happen
Right.
as you're a drug addict and all
Right.
this other stuff, and then you go, oh, but the government gives it to us for free. That's kind of like an oxymoron. You're saying one thing and saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is going to happen to you. This is your brain on drugs, and then yeah, here, go try it for yourself.
No, I don't think it would ever be, go try it for yourself. It is though that you see, if you're not going to have, you see, I say that the most people who get addicted to drugs, they get addicted because there's a monetary interest involved. Somebody wants to sell those drugs. And so if there's nobody at the schools, there are no pushers, there's nobody making money off of it, there's not going to be that hard sell to get people to start using drugs. Okay. And so then you teach them, what are the ramifications if you get addicted to something. Well, we're going to talk to this guy who he ruined his life because of he actually even ruined his brain because of drug addictions. You give the kids the information they need to understand what's going to happen if they get addicted. Now, they may choose to go ahead and experiment, but they will do so with the knowledge of what they're potentially dealing with. And if they do get addicted, they can go to these living quarters where they can continue to take their drugs if they want, or they can choose to get treated. Now, again, the point is if somebody's addicted, they're going to find ways to get their drugs, one way or another. So even if we make them illegal, even if they're living in the street, they're going to do what they have to get those drugs. And that's going to send money to the cartels. And this, by the way, these powerful, incredibly moneyed cartels are ruining democracies everywhere south of the border. And they're one of the big reasons why we have such a refugee problem, an immigration problem, because these cartels, they control so much of the country. They control, the politicians, they control the police. And, a lot of these people, I'm actually here in South America, I met lots of people like this where, the drug cartel will say, okay, your son's going to work for us. Your daughter's going to service us. You're going to give us some of your income. If you don't like it, we'll kill you all. And
so what do you say to the person that's going through, has addict members of a family? Like I know one person that just typed in my chat, I saw an addiction take my dad and my brother. I have the smarts to know better, and I'm still an addict who can't quit for a very long time. Or for very long. Right. What do you say to the people that are just using it as a coping mechanism to deal with whatever they're dealing with? Or they grew up in an addict home. Their whole family was an addict. It's a generational thing, generational trauma is for real. Sure. And it's passed down and passed down. Like you yourself were saying, your family was your family members higher than you were also addicts. And yes, you broke that addiction. Yes, absolutely. And you're trying not to pass it down to your kids, but that's not saying that everybody's going to be the same way. It's free choice. We have free choice for a reason. And it's almost socialist type thinking. I'm going to say socialist because I'm not a socialist, but but it's almost regulating. That's too much government control, too much government regulation.
Well, okay. Well, the question is okay, where do you want those drugs to be coming from? Do you want them to be going?
I want them to stop.
Where do you want that money to go to? And exactly the way to stop it, the only way to stop it is to give people, the tools that they need to make the choices. It's just like with tobacco,
Okay, how about weed?
What?
Marijuana. They legalized it in almost 50 states in the union for medical purposes. You can get it with the prescription pretty cheap. Yet not necessarily free, but cheap enough that it's not you're not going out to commit crimes and going and hurting somebody to get it, just like alcohol, it's readily available, taxed, but still readily available. What do you say? If there's
Yeah. Well,
big business for the government, if it's going to be
right.
government controlled, that means it's going to be taxed. There's somebody's going to be make some kind of money somewhere, whether
Right.
it be the grower, the producer, the distributor, the
Right.
wholesaler, whatever else. There's going to be a
Right.
money chain. So where does it go?
Well, I think that's why, the most important thing is educating kids from an early age about, okay, we talk about weed. Okay. So if you teach children, teach students about, the effects of weed, the dangers of weed, they can make that choice. The important thing is you've got to give them the knowledge. We're not talking about control. We're talking about knowledge. And let me give you a kind of an analogy to this
Okay.
is junk food. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't understand just how many, for example, calories they're eating when they start getting hooked to junk food. And this happened with me once. I can remember I was living in Japan, and there was this grapefruit juice, and it had the can said 50 calories. I thought, oh great, 50 calories! I can drink this stuff all day. And I started gaining weight, and I thought, well, what is this all about? And then I
Sugar.
realized it was 50 calories for a serving, and a serving there are 3.5 servings in a can. And so I think that a lot of people, for example, don't understand just how many calories they're consuming and how hard it is to burn those off. And so you give them that information, and then they can decide, okay, this is a proper, junk food. There's nothing wrong with junk food as long as it's not regular. And you have to be careful to not get addicted to it. And so, enjoy junk food occasionally, but don't get addicted to it. And because if you do get addicted to it, you're likely to gain weight and have some health issues. And so, what it all comes down to, we're not banning junk food. We're just giving people the information that they need
Okay.
to make wise decisions. And this is why I think the drug war,
Isn't that
or,
what addiction awareness and recover people that okay, most people know the side effects of the addiction. Okay, addiction is a side effect in itself of dealing with whatever you're going through. It's a coping mechanism, and addiction is the side effect. None of us start out as an addict. None of us
right,
start. None of
right,
us try one thing and become an addict.
right,
It's we learn that we like this feeling,
right,
and it helps me forget whatever I'm going through. So let me do
right.
some more of it. And then the next thing you know, you can't stop. That's the addict. Addiction is
Yeah.
a side effect. Addiction is a side effect of trauma, of mental
Hmm.
health, of whatever
Hmm.
you're covering up or going through or coping. Fitting in is, and a
Hmm.
side effect becomes addiction. All of that
Sure.
becomes a side effect of the main issue. Now,
Hmm.
as I was a kid, I knew what drugs would do. I knew exactly
Hmm.
what drugs would do, but I still chose it.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
most
Right.
people in
And
here, most people that are going to be listening I know exactly the effects that drugs have on the body and on the
right,
mind and everything
right.
else, but they're still going to choose it to numb the feeling, to forget of what they went through.
Right. Uh-huh. Okay, that's fine. But where do you want the money? Okay, if somebody's going to be taking drugs to cope, okay, they're going to find ways to take drugs one way or another. So the question is, okay, is it better to just give them their drugs, let them, you know, uh, you know take their drugs and exist in that sort of lifestyle where they're not living on the street, where they're not, causing issues, that affect businesses downtown or tourism downtown. That's one choice. The other choice is, okay, do you want them, living in the street, scraping up money to give to their drug pusher? That money is going to go to the drug cartels, which is causing unimaginable problems south of the border, which come back
I
to
agree.
affect us, by the way. And
I agree.
so, the question is somebody makes the choice to start taking or abusing substances, drugs, what we call illicit drugs now. The question is okay, how is the best way to deal with this that is going to cause minimum problems for the rest of society and for the rest of the entire hemisphere, by the way. And so, okay, it's better, I think, to have, okay, somebody has made the choice to do this. Okay, you can take your drugs, but this is what's going to happen. This is, these are the effects it's going to have on your brain. Now, you're always going to have access to therapy to help you get past this. But in the meantime, you just go ahead and, if your whole life is centered around those drugs, well, that's just the way, you've made that choice. So you go ahead and do that, but you're always going to have access to medical care and therapy at these facilities. That's
So
much better.
now, didn't Canada try that with their harm reduction clinics or their needle exchanges and everything else? And that's not working very well for them. Or Oregon or Washington. They're the first ones in this country, the United States. They came out with harm reduction and needle exchanges, and do your drugs here in this safe building, and you know what? Then go out there. Let's make sure you're safe and don't overdose. Right. And then you can go out there and do whatever. The problem is it's not the drug addict. The drug addict is not the problem. The problem is what they're going through and the drugs nowadays. So you've got, now I would agree to certain aspects of what you're saying. Like if it would be more better things, you would know what you're getting. If you're doing it that way, you know what you're getting. You're not getting something laced with fentanyl.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes. I agree with that. But to make them readily available, there's a lot of functioning addicts out there that don't need help, that don't have a problem yet because they work, they go to school, they get good grades. In fact, it helps them get them through their day. That's the only thing that quiets the brain, quiets the voices in their head to be a functioning adult.
Sure.
Okay. And the kids that are doing it, didn't necessarily start out, let me try this because all my friends are. And the next thing you know, that's not doing it. So let me try something else. And then something else. Weed is not a gateway drug. I'll tell you that. Weed is not the gateway drug. Trauma, emotional stress, trauma, mental health is the gateway drug.
Right.
Doctors are the gateway drug.
Yeah. I agree with that. But the question is, I think, I'm going to come back to my original point here, is that people who need drugs for whatever reason to cope or whatever are going to find a way to get those drugs. And so the question is, do you want them to get those drugs? Which, by the way, if they're coming from the government, let's say, now, believe me, I am not a government first type of guy. I'm a free market. I believe in that. But when it comes to this particular thing, okay, the question is do you want people who want to take drugs or who have to take the drugs, okay, getting those drugs from who knows, what's in those drugs? Like you say, what are they laced with? These cartels, they got lots of money to do lots of research to make their drugs incredibly and very quickly addictive, okay? And who knows what else they're putting in there? Well, if you get it from a government source for free, okay, you know it's going to be, let's say, it's not going to have weird stuff put into it. And number two, the most important thing is that these people who need those drugs are not sending the money to these drug cartels, because that's what we want to get rid of. We don't want people in high schools, for example, pushing drugs because that's a way to make money. That's the key, is that as long as you can make money selling drugs and getting people hooked, we're never going to solve the problem, because
So what do you say to the mom that's pregnant, still using drugs, and their baby comes out addicted, and they have to put them on Suboxone or any of these other things? They come out in immediate withdrawals, and the only thing to make the baby live is by giving them a drug. What would you say to that? What would you say to that kid that's already born an addict, basically?
Right.
Literally, they would be born as an addict.
Right. Well, I would rather have that mother and that child living in a facility where they have access to treatment, that the child would have access to treatment. Because what's the alternative? Where are they going to live otherwise? In the street, in a tent? Have them in a
addiction affects everybody from the top down. It's all the same. Yeah. You could be the president of the United States and you can still be an addict. You could be very well paid and well in power addict, but you could still be an addict.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, but even in that case, would not it be better for them or for the mother, I think it would be better for the mother, if she's going to be determined to get those drugs, to get them from a source that's not going to be lacing the drugs with who knows what. And number two, that you give them access to therapy, because in the final analysis, that's the only thing you can do.
So are you saying like,
them.
would you agree with the forced recovery, forcing somebody, forced recovery, or
No.
okay? So
No.
isn't it up to the addict whether they want to quit or if they've hit their rock bottom?
Exactly.
And if let's be real, if the government's supplying it and it's free, nobody's ever going to hit a rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. If you're giving them houses, hold on. Let me make this point. If you're giving them a place to live, you're providing food for them, you're providing a stable environment for them, what's the benefit? What's the downturn if they decide they want to just keep using it? There is none, because you're providing everything for them. Yes, I agree with some things, but it's just like it'd be the government enabling everybody. They would enable me. I wouldn't want to stop. I wouldn't have stopped. Neither would my freaking wife that I was married to. She wouldn't have stopped either. A lot of people won't stop because they have nothing to lose. Now, if you're, and this goes to this whole point, if you have nothing to lose, why stop?
Well, I think that you do have something to lose. You're basically, losing the opportunity to have a productive life, to have a life that's is worth living. And I think that, especially if you have a child, then you have an incentive to get better. But I guess my point is that, somebody who is hopelessly addicted, you've got a choice of, what's the most you can do is you can give them access to therapy. But the last thing you want them to do is to be desperately doing anything they have to get money to buy those drugs. That's what the key point is here.
Right.
And so, okay, because we want to destroy the cartel business. We want to get pushers out of the high schools, because I think that once you get, these salespeople out of the high schools, or wherever they are,
doctors, most doctors,
oh yes,
people that are prescribed prescription pills are addictive. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind. But so you're talking about getting the pushers out. That means you're going to have to eliminate doctors. You're going to have to eliminate pharmaceutical companies. You're going to have to do all this other elimination that just might not sit well with everybody.
Well, I totally agree. But when it comes to legal drugs, there should be a lot more, severe penalties for peddling drugs under the legal banner that are highly addictive. If a doctor is, has a financial incentive, no doctor should ever have a financial incentive to prescribe highly addictive drugs. Any sort of drug a legal drug that is potentially addictive must be prescribed in a way that minimizes the probability that they're going to get addicted. There can never be, you see, one of the reasons, the whole thing with this whole opioid crisis was the financial incentives. The financial, the Statler family, they made billions of dollars.
Hillbill and heroin, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and
that's where it started.
And obviously, the doctors had financial incentives in this as well. And you've got to get the financial incentives, whether we're talking about legal drugs or illegal drugs. You've got to get the financial incentives out of the picture, and that's what the whole point is because it's the money. It's the money that is making this such a scourge in our society. Just like, it's just like with prohibition, making alcohol illegal didn't get rid of people not drinking. All it did was make it the business of the gangsters and the criminals. And this is exactly what's happening with the drug business, whether we're talking about legal drugs or illegal drugs. If you name your addiction, Jay, I can guarantee you there's somebody making money off it. And so, there's some things, that we can't we can't control people's behavior, but at least we can give them from an early age the education, number one, and number two, you take away the financial incentives for getting people addicted. That is what the whole thing is about. Now, these are just ideas. Again, I'm all ears. You know, it's not like this way or the highway. I'm all ears. These are my ideas, and it comes down to two things. One, you educate people from an early age about the different types of addictions, the physiological effects of addictions, the effects on your life if you do get addicted. And we're talking not just about drugs, we're talking about video games, we're talking about gambling. And then you take away the financial incentives. And for example, let's talk about gambling. You know, the sports gambling thing is taken off, and lots of young men are getting addicted to this gambling.
Absolutely.
Now, the thing is that you got to teach kids is that, you know, gambling, you know, go and have a little fun at Las Vegas, you know, blowing off some steam, you know, what the heck, go to the horse track, you know, bet on horses, but you got to be aware of the telltale signs that you're getting addicted. And, you know, this is why it's so critical that we teach our kids from an early age. Like, let's talk about sports gambling. Whenever it comes to gambling, whether you talk about casinos or sports gambling, you are mathematically guaranteed to lose over the long term.
Absolutely.
You know, you might win, you know, temporarily, but it's a combination, especially in the casinos, it's a combination of statistics. You're statistically guaranteed to lose. It's a combination of alcohol. They give you free alcohol, break down your ambitions, and they work psychology. If you play 10 times, you win 4, you lose 6, you're going to win. You're going to remember those 4 times you won, and you're going to keep doing it. And so, you know, you've got to teach kids, from students from an early age. This is why I propose this Addiction Awareness Day, is that where you teach them about the different, from a very early age, every year, 1 year at school, dedicate to teaching kids about the dangers of addictions, about the different types of addictions, about the telltale signs of addictions, hearing stories of addicts. And that's the best you can do in the final analysis. That's number one. That's one of the best things you can do, is to make them aware so they can make their own decisions.
Okay,
And
I agree with
two, you take away the financial incentives. And
okay.
so what I have proposed is, because if you can't make money selling drugs, there's no drug business. You can't make, if there's no money in selling drugs, then there is no drug business. And so that gets rid of the pushers. That gets rid of the people who, you know, instead of going to work at the restaurant, you know, and bootstrapping their way up, they go for the easy money, you know, pushing their friends to
Right.
take drugs. And so we want to get those perverse financial incentives. And then once we cut off the flow of money, the drug cartels don't have a business. We can concentrate more of our resources fighting drugs on things like human trafficking,
Right.
and these other things, because the drug war has been a miserable failure. And
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I agree. I think that you've got a lot of good points, but I don't agree with the addict one, because the money's going somewhere. It takes money to produce drugs. So it's going to take money to it's who's footing that bill, who's going to get paid on who's paying for all this and how.
Okay. Let me just make this point. Okay. Let's take a look at Portland, Oregon, where I've spent a lot of time. Okay. Now, we have to do a cost benefit analysis. Would it be better to take all these people who are living in the street and who are addicted to drugs, to take them, put them in a comfortable place, you know, outside of the city?
Again, who's paying for that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me get to that. Okay. Taxpayer money would pay for that. But let's look at the other side of the coin, though. If you make the downtown attractive again for business, if you make the downtown attractive again for tourism, if you make the downtown attractive again for living, you're going to more than recoup. My theory is you're going to more than recoup by far the money. You're going to get a lot more tax revenue from having a healthy business environment downtown. If you go to downtown Portland now, you know, it looks like a war zone. Half the businesses are boarded up. My daughter was working at a downtown restaurant, and they almost went out of business because people were selling drugs right outside the window. You know, we had a combination of people who are mentally ill and drug addicts harassing the customers. And so this restaurant went out of business. Lots of restaurants went out of business. Hotels had problems. All sorts of businesses that I used to visit, you know, are gone. And so if you have to, it's going to cost some money to house them. It's going to cost some money. I don't think it would be that much, but it's going to cost some money to produce these drugs to give them. but you're going to make the environment much better for business, for tourism, for living, and you're going to get much more tax revenue than you're losing from supporting these people. And oh, by the way, you're going to give them access, constant access to therapy, because I believe that most people, not all, but a lot of people who have addictions, like my own father, he desperately wanted to quit alcohol, and and other people I know who desperately wanted to quit, but they haven't had the easy access to therapy. You put them there. That is going to be an investment that's going to be more than pay itself back by not having, the downtown area in the sorry state that's in. It's also going to help because we're not going to be sending billions of dollars to the drug cartels, which cause havoc in South America, Central America, which sends refugees. And oh, by the way, these places would be great for tourism, but a lot of people don't want to go because of the danger. Whether we're talking about Mexico or some of these places, some parts you don't go to. These would be great for retirement, inexpensive retirement places.
Like one of the people in the chat said, "Are you trying to actually help the addict, or you're not trying to help the addict? You're trying to clean up an image, or you're just trying to?" That's actually a good question. And she also said, all you're trying to do is put a Band-Aid on a situation, which potentially I agree with, but the Band-Aid solution ain't going to work. I honestly totally I don't think just by taking in Oregon and Seattle, Portland, Seattle, those, and Canada and even Europe, the European countries, where they decriminalized it and made it more readily available. Look at the problems.
Did they get rid of the economic incentives? That's the key. Did they get rid of the economic? As long as you can make money selling those drugs, there's going to be business people, or let's call them business people. They're going to be people who take advantage of that to sell drugs, because what's the best business to be in, as we talked about earlier? Selling to addicts. And so
as an addict myself, if I knew that all these programs were available to get my drugs, guess what? Mm-hmm. I don't want to be known as an addict, so I'm still not going to go to those places, and I'm still going to get it illegal. Either from the person that's scamming the system to get it legally to sell to me, because there's going to be a lot of that, or from the street.
Okay. If you want to go, okay, the thing is that it's going to be very hard for somebody to sell you a drug that you can get for free.
No, I don't think so. Especially if you don't want anybody else to know. You don't want your family. You don't want your friends. You don't want people at work or anything else knowing that you're doing this. I'm going to go to 2 towns over to get my stuff, and from the person that's claiming to be an addict and living for free and getting it for free and then selling it to me for a side hustle, because you know what? There's anything can be a hustle turned into money. I can sell my lighter to the right person for money. I can sell air to somebody that can't breathe very well. I can sell ice to Eskimos. Right. So there's always going to be a business of retail or wholesale sales, especially if somebody's getting it for free, because the big motivation factor is money. Money across the board is the big motivation factor. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're the seller, the producer, whatever. Somebody's going to be willing to sell it to me, and somebody's going to be willing to buy it at that set price.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The thing is that I want to make this clear, that the free drugs would not just be at these places where people who have nowhere else to go. I mean, there could be, even at a drugstore, you could get them discreetly. You don't have to. It's not going to be. You have to be advertising the fact you're getting these things. You can get them discreetly, but you can get them, yes, for free at any drugstore or whatever, and no questions asked. And so
who's going to produce them for free?
Well, yes, this would be the government, because what are the benefits of that? Okay, if we don't have the drug cartels, okay, we're not going to be sending billions of dollars of illegal money going to the drug cartels. We're not going to have to, because it's not a business and they don't have a business, we're not going to have the enforcement mechanism that we have, because they can't make any money off it. So why are they going to be? So think of all the money we're going to save. How many billions of dollars? I mean, tens of billions of dollars, probably $1 trillion we spent on this drug war, over the last 5 decades. Probably a lot more, but at least $1 trillion. I know that. Okay. So to produce these drugs and give them for free would be far, far less expensive than what we're doing now. And again, so you don't have to go to the next town over where they've got the facilities for people who have no place else to go. You can get them anywhere, and you can get them discreetly, but you'll always have, access to therapy if you get addicted. And you see, it's like, what do I say? There are no good choices here. It's
Right.
like you have to decide. Well, what's the way to really attack this? And my theory is just basically the three things. First of all, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but you take away the economics. You destroy the economics. There is no business. Number two, you give people who do have problems, you give them access to therapy, discrete therapy. And number three, the most important thing is teaching people, or teaching our students from an early age, and everybody, the dangers of addiction, the telltale signs of addictions, the damaging effects of addictions. And like I say, all the different types of addictions that are out there. You've got to be aware. I think you've got to teach kids that you can get addiction to gambling, to drugs, to alcohol, to tobacco, and what happens to the brain when it gets addicted. And these are the telltale signs. So that, you give them the information. The best you can do is it's just like I did with my daughter. I tried to tell her, all the things that have happened in our family because of alcoholism. I tried to show her different examples, and I gave her all the information she needed, but she still chose to go down that path. And in the final analysis, you can't stop somebody from doing it, but at least you can give them the information so they can make the choice. If they want to make an unwise decision, okay, they're going to make their unwise decision, but you don't want some cartel making money off of their unwise decision. You don't want to have to spend billions of dollars to try to, in this futile effort to keep the drugs from coming over the border, or wherever they're coming from. Or for example, my sister lives in rural Utah, very close to an Indian reservation. How many of those houses on the Indian reservation are actually being used to produce things like meth and fentanyl? Okay,
well,
and why do they do this?
Fentanyl, probably not. That comes from the south of the border. Okay. Methamphetamine, probably not. Because
they said they told me, maybe they just were. They told me those things, but that could have been their own, lack of knowledge. That's what they told me. And, because these houses would have, their windows, they would have the dark.
Okay. So that's a good point you bring up. So the Native Americans, when we first moved Native Americans onto a reservation, they were given the tools, the equipment to grow food, produce food, the houses to live in, and they still refused. Mm-hmm. So that goes a lot, saying if we just take that as an example, it was forced into reservations, but they were given they were taught how to grow their food. They already knew how to get their food, hunt their food, but they were taught how to grow their food the way the white men did it. They were given houses. They were shown how to do all this other things, and that was all government funded, government sponsored, and government, watched over. Yet, how successful was that?
Oh, I totally agree. For example, in this part of rural Utah, the government gives them a monthly stipend. It gives them, housing. Yep. And what has happened? It's basically destroyed their culture.
Exactly.
And it's absolutely tragic. But
so just taking that as a model, just taking that, one of the very first models where government did something to people, and you can class me as a people because I am an addict. I am in one of those statistics. Right. I fall into that category as one of them, so taking that as a model for anything, it's bound to fail.
Well,
Just because producing it is not free. The money's got to be made somewhere, and taxpayers ain't going to foot the bill to support somebody else's habit.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that we're talking a little bit apples and oranges here, because what we're talking about is subsidizing, their entire lives on one thing. But
That's what you're talking about an addict, though, too.
What
you're telling them,
yeah, but not. That's after they're addicted. This is after they become addicted. Okay. This is not from the time they're born, they're getting subsidy. This is for somebody who is hopelessly addicted. And so what do you do? Okay. You can't live in the street. So we provided these facilities for you. You can go ahead and take your drugs. You'll have access to therapy. You'll have access to medical treatment. And, that's the best you can do with.
Okay. What do you tell the gambling addict that's addicted to gambling? So are you going to make gambling illegal again?
No, I'm talking specifically about drugs. But what I am saying, though, is that the best you can do with gambling and these sort of behavioral things is education and you provide therapy. That's why I have proposed this Addiction Awareness Day, because you've got to I think a lot of people,
this is Addiction Awareness Month. The month of September is Addiction Awareness Month.
Yeah.
Just in case you didn't know.
The difference is that Addiction Awareness Day would be the school day would be dedicated exclusively to teaching kids once a year on the different things. So you could have, like, as I say, you come in and you teach the kids about the different types of addiction, because the human brain can get addicted to all things, which includes gambling, which includes junk food, which includes this. You talk about the psychological, or I should say physiological characteristics of an addiction. What are the telltale signs of addictions? What are the ramifications if you do get addicted to something? So you make people aware of addiction, because, as I say, and I think you would agree, how much of our economy is actually based on addictions? Whether we're talking,
there's a lot.
It's an incredible amount. Whether we're talking about, junk food, whether we're talking about gambling, whether we're talking about drugs, whether we're talking about tobacco, whether we're talking about alcohol, whether we're talking about pornography, whether we're talking about social media, whether we're talking about, the emotion manipulating, news. There are all sorts of things people can get addicted to. And why is this? Is because it's huge business. And so, I don't think our country should have an economy that is so based on people's addictions. So the best thing you can do is to teach them from an early age, and then they're going to have to make their choice, but at least they'll have the knowledge. They're going to know what they're getting into. And I think, for example, with the sports gambling, a lot of young men are getting into this, not understanding, you're not going to win.
It's the euphoric high after they win one time. It's the chance. It's the euphoric feeling that they feel as a winner. It's the immediate gratification, and everybody has it. It's the dopamine receptors, all these other receptors that I could use medical terms for, but it's pointless because I don't understand them. I just know, as an addict, the reason we become addicted is because it does something to our heads that it rewires our brain, saying, ooh, this is immediate, this is fun, and you know what? I want more of it.
Exactly. I totally agree. And that's why I said, this whole gambling is a combination of statistics, and it's a combination of psychology. Because if you play 10 times, you lose 6, you win 4, you're going to remember those 4 times you won, not the 6 times you lost.
I'm the reverse. So, I lose one time and I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm good.
Well, that's me too. Yeah, that's me too. And when
I'd rather go spend my money on my drug that gets me high for days instead of just, lose a couple bucks here. Why didn't I spend that on my dope? That was my addict. Yeah, that was my addict thinking. Right. And it also did a lot of other things, but still, our time is coming to a close. I just want to give you that warning. And is there anything else you want to tell anybody out there that might be listening?
Well, it's basically this. Let's get a free flow of ideas about how to address this problem. That's all that really matters. I'm all ears. I like to keep I'm very open-minded on this. And so these are my ideas. My ideas are basically, let's destroy the economic model for the illegal drugs and even for legal drugs. Let's make therapy available, but most of all, let's educate, because education, people, if they're educated and they still decide to get addicted to something, well, that's their choice. But let's not have people get addicted to things because they weren't aware of the danger. That's basically what it comes down to. So, I have these ideas are, but this specifically about addictions is on solutionsparty.org. It's called Toward an Addiction-Free America. Those are my ideas. I want to have a fun, positive discussion about this. Let's have an interchange of ideas, but let's work toward a country where addictions are under control, where
Absolutely.
people are aware of the dangers of addictions, and let's get an economy. Let's have an economy that's based on things that are more positive than addictions. So that's
I can agree with you on 100%. And you know what? There has also got to be more of an open, honest dialogue between everybody, and it's got to be less of a stigma. It's got to be less of a society looks down on everybody else that's not an addict.
Totally agree.
And the more open dialogue we can have, the more things will change. And that dialogue is people disagreeing, plain and simple.
Disagree. People have always disagreed, but the important thing is how we handle those disagreements.
Absolutely.
So we handle disagreements with civility and an honest exchange, and we understand the other people have the best interests at heart as well. And we treat everybody
equal,
with dignity and respect. There
100%.
is no stigma here. There is no stigma here. We've all dealt with issues, addictive issues. I have. My family has, and you respect everybody, you have an affection for everybody, and you work to make things better. But let's exchange the ideas. Let's have the emotionally charged discussions, but at the end, let's stay friends.
That is 100% positive, and I agree with you 100%. And you know what? Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. I'm going to take a lot of what you had to say into account. But however, I still will disagree with some of the things. I don't disagree with everything. And you know what? That's what human nature is. We don't have to agree 100% of the time to respect another. And that is our show today. I'm Jay, your host. That's Evan. And go check out his website if you want to give it a shout out again.
Evan Jaqua at solutionsparty.org. And all ideas are welcome, so please give me your feedback. And be as brutal as you want to be. It's, I'm pretty thick skinned. So
go to solutionsparty.org, check out Evan Jaqua. And that's the show today. Keep rocking your recovery. Thank you, Evan, for being here.
Thank you, Jay. I really have enjoyed it.
Me too. Actually, it was a good conversation.
Thank you.